let's rewind just a little bit. From your years of research, from a psychological, biological standpoint, what is actually happening in the brain when we emotionally eat? Let's talk about that first, then we'll get into shame.
Okay. So I'm first going to define what shame is and then how we get that established and then what happens in our brain from the neuroscience of shame, which is really something that I'm very passionate about talking about right now. And so let's begin with distinguishing the difference between healthy and unhealthy shame. Healthy shame is when you make a mistake, you have a flaw, a weakness, a failure, and you feel a conviction inside, like, "Ooh, I shouldn't have done that," or that needs to be attended to in some way. This is helpful information because it allows us to attend to what needs to be attended to. We might go up to a friend and say, "Hey, I'm really sorry. I kind of felt bad afterwards, and let's talk about that." That's good. That develops our consciousness. We are able to improve. And in that way, that shame response, that conviction, or what some people will call guilt, is our teacher. It's alerting us. It's like, "Hey, don't do that again. This is not in your best interest. Step back." And we want to say to that healthy shame, "Thank you so much for guarding that door for me." Toxic shame, however, is the message that when you made a mistake, you didn't just make a mistake. You are a mistake. You're flawed, you're defective, you're unworthy, you don't belong. It's that message that I'm not likable, I'm not lovable, I'm not, something is in me that is going to make people not want me, to not want to include me, to not love me, and not like me. And this gets in our hearts, like we plant it like a seed in our heart. And then we go through life gathering information to support that belief, that false, deceptive lie of shame. And how this happens is when we're little people, our brain, we don't have a frontal lobe. We don't have what they call a prefrontal cortex, which is what we need. It's the last thing to develop in our brain. So think about the brain's development from back to front. I got the perfect model for you. Have you seen this before? We have this is the spine, your hand's the spine, and this is your brain system here. The first thing that develops is the back of the brain, which is what we use for all of our basic breathing, our heart rate, our coordination, and it starts to move up here into our motor skills. Well, in the middle of the brain is what every animal has, including a lizard. So we call it the primal brain or the lizard brain. And over that is the frontal and prefrontal cortex, which is what makes us different from other primates, from other animals. And this part of our brain is really the executive in the office, so to speak. It's managing everything in our life. It's using critical thinking. It's multitasking. It's what we use for judgment, for delayed gratification, for emotion regulation. It's all right there in the prefrontal cortex. This is where we think about our thinking. It happens in the front of our brain. But that doesn't finish getting developed until our mid-20s. So essentially, you have this half-brained person that can't regulate their emotions. They can't think about their thinking. They don't have that critical thinking ability. So what we do is we farm it out to the adults in our world, and we rely on them to regulate our emotions. We rely on them to help us understand the world. How are we supposed to think about the world? How are we supposed to feel about the world? How do we solve our problems? How do we analyze situations? And as we develop, this wave goes through our brain as it develops to kind of give us everything we need to navigate through this world. And so when our nervous system gets activated, we have two parts of our nervous system, a part that calms our nervous system and a part that speeds it up. And they work in partnership. So if your heart rate goes up, you start breathing really deeply to bring your heart rate down. If your body gets really hot, you start to sweat to bring it down. So we're always working in this balance. So what happens for us as adults is that and I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but I'm going to finish this little hand model,
No, this is great.
is that when our nervous system gets activated, we flip our lids and we become lizard brains. So this is when two people are talking. I'm upset. What? And they start fighting like this, and then they go away, and their nervous system begins to calm them down, and the lid comes back on. And then we go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that, and so forth.
That's a really, really, really powerful explanation of that. I think you just right there makes so much sense.
Yes.
That's huge right there. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we'll go more, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about how overeating kicks into the lizard brain dynamic. But to go back to how we experience our shame, as little people, we don't have that prefrontal cortex, so we don't know how to think. So we look to our parents like these giant mirrors, our parents and our teachers and our peers, our siblings, and we say, who am I? Am I lovable? Am I likable? Do I have strengths? Do I have weaknesses? Help me know who I am.
Mm,
So we get messages about who we are by what they say to us and by what they don't say to us, how they touch us or how they don't touch us. All that information gets woven in. And then we go forward in life saying, this is who I am. This is what's possible in my life. And we support those beliefs. Now, part of that has to do with the trauma response, in that if somebody has a parent who is unable to provide a physically and psychologically safe home environment, then that parent is going to rupture and get mad and yell at the kid and so forth, and can't help that kid regulate their emotions because the parent's lid is flipped all the time.
right.
To survive that reality, we will take responsibility for those adults' behavior, because it's easier for us to survive living in that context if we say, oh, they didn't mean to do that. It's because I'm a bad girl. I'm a bad boy. That's why my parents are acting the way they are. Because if we believe that, then we have some control in a situation that we feel out of control. So whenever we feel out of control, we'll flip it and blame ourselves to navigate through that. And what I find, sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so that I just thought of an example. If I'm in sixth grade and I come home from school and I'm just hanging out doing my homework, and my dad comes home and he has this awful day at work and starts taking it, like yelling or being pissed off about whatever, I then see it as that was my fault versus he just had a bad day at work. That's basically how I would process it, is what you're saying. So now every time someone in the future might get mad at me, then I process as that was my fault.
Even in shame-bound families, we say there's some families are shame-bound and some are shame-free. In shame-bound families, they teach the child the message that you are responsible for my feelings and you are responsible for my behavior. So that child will make it their job to regulate their parent. If I can make that parent feel happy and better, or I don't upset them, or I don't activate them, then it will be better. My world will be safe. My world will be predictable. So then they grow up as an adult, continuing that assignment to manage other people's parts, to manage how people feel, how they behave, what they're doing, and they don't have a proper boundary with that. And then if it's not working the way it's supposed to, they'll say, what's wrong with me? We'll create a shame narrative around something that doesn't make sense, so it will make sense.
Because our
Because
brain has to make sense of it somehow.